Welcome back to episode 8 of the Lantern Sports Podcast, hosted by the Lantern Sports Desk here at The Ohio State University. I'm Steven Kishpaugh, Assistant Sports Editor to the Lantern. Joining me as always, we have Gabe Burggraf, Assistant LTV Sports Producer, Jacob Benge, Sports Editor, and Casey Smith, Head LTV Sports Producer. Gentlemen, as always, a lot of news around Ohio State athletics before we get into this noon matchup on Saturday versus Iowa. For the swim and dive teams, both are in the preseason top 15 dual meet programs, with the women ranking 5th and the men ranking 12th. The women's basketball team is ranked 14th in the preseason AP poll, and senior guard Taylor Mikesell is on the preseason watch list for the Ann Myers Drysdale Award for the top shooting guard in women's basketball. The women's soccer team is now ranked 17th and finishes the season with matchups at number 6 Michigan State and number 13 at home against number 13 Northwestern, with the Big Ten regular season title still up for grabs. Captain Kayla Fisher was named Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week for the second time this season and has scored 7 goals in the last 5 games. The women's volleyball team is still ranked 6th as they host Illinois tonight and Iowa this week. Both teams are combined 0-14 against ranked opponents despite multiple 5-set matches. Ohio State is currently tied for second in the Big Ten with a 7-1 conference record. For the number 1 women's hockey team, Sophie Jacques was named WCHA Defender of the Week after tallying 4 goals in the weekend set against Bemidji State, and they host number 4 Minnesota Duluth in a national championship rematch this weekend at Ohio State Ice Rink. And then finally, men's soccer team is ranked number 13th in the nation, and they take a trip to State College to face Penn State. Through 13 games this season, the men's soccer team has the fewest losses and the highest winning percentage in program history. Now for football, I kind of want to let you guys take this over because I'm not going to lie, I don't have a lot of good things to say about Iowa's offense. Jacob, you talked to coaches and players yesterday at media availability. What did you hear from them in terms of just, what they're looking forward to with Iowa, and what did they learn throughout the bye week?
Yeah, they didn't have too much to say about Iowa, but the one thing that Ryan Day, and what stood out to me, when Ryan Day brought up the scar that he has from the last time Ohio State played Iowa, you mentioned Iowa's offense. Perhaps Ohio State's been reminded of the 55 points that Iowa scored against the Buckeyes in their last meeting in 2017. It's not too often that Ohio State and Iowa match up, which is kind of interesting. It's been almost 10 years since Iowa's been to the Shoe in Ohio Stadium, and they're catching Ohio State at a time where the Buckeyes are coming off an off week. Ryan Day rather said that Ohio State's not going to reveal too much about the injury updates regarding Jackson Smith and Jake Mayan Williams, some key contributors there on offense. But coming in on Saturday, I'm interested to see how Ohio State can maybe rebound out of a week off. It was definitely a big week college football-wise and outside of the Big Ten even. But for Ohio State, I don't know how much the Buckeyes are looking ahead to next week. It's second road game of the season, but first they got to get through Iowa, one program among 2 in the Big Ten that most recently Ohio State has not beaten.
Jacob, you want a nugget?
Oh, man, keep it going. Order up.
All right. Yeah, Gabe's got his McDonald's cup. Figured I'd give him a 10-piece right now.
Sure.
So, Iowa is one of 2 teams to have beaten Ohio State the last time they faced. Other obviously being Michigan. In that matchup you were talking about, 55 points scored. You know how many they've scored this season through 6 games?
6 games? You would figure more than 55 total.
Yeah, you're on the right track.
Doesn't sound very confident.
I'm going 70. 70 is my limit.
88. So, they put up 55 in the last meeting between the two, and now their offense has only scored 88 points in 6 games this season. They're averaging 14.7 points per game on offense, which, believe it or not, they're averaging a win every single time because their defense has only given up 9.8 points. The only 2 times they've given up double digits, they gave up 10 points, and then they gave up 27 to Michigan, and Michigan's in the top 4. So I think this could also be a good measuring stick to see how Ohio State matches up against a team like Michigan, just sort of in the landscape of the Big Ten and also the college football playoff.
Well, it's interesting also because Iowa, looking back at last year, Nebraska hung tight in a lot of these games. Iowa's been in a lot of these games, they just haven't won them. So their offense has not been enough to overcome what their defense has provided in holding teams to lower scores. Now, that's probably not going to happen against Ohio State in the Shoe Saturday. But, Illinois only scored 9 points. Chase Brown is an excellent back, and they rushed all over Iowa. They had 200 rushing yards, but only just over 100 passing yards. So that game was 9-6. And if you look at most of their scores, they've been within a score. Michigan is one of the real outliers, but that was a 2-score game. So again, they were within striking distance. The problem for them is they really don't have the artillery to finish the job and kind of score to take advantage of what their defense gives them.
I honestly believe that Iowa citizens, fans, taxpayers, they should all request an audit of the Iowa football team. I don't know how it's possible that Brian Ferentz makes $900,000 a year and their offense is either dead last or second to dead last in the entire country in scoring. Iowa is such a storied program. They have a great fan base, one of the best traditions in college football with, the Children's Hospital and doing the wave and all that. That it's a great fan base and a great culture. And it's just such a shame to see somebody who has no business calling multiple plays on offenses and running a whole college offense, run it into the ground like Brian Ferentz is currently doing.
Well, I think it's interesting also because the season is not over for Iowa. Because after Ohio State, they get Northwestern, Purdue, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska to finish. So there are a handful of winning, possibly a couple wins in there, and looking at that side of the division.
And
chaos.
Wild, wild west, if you will.
But yeah, they've got something to play for. It's just it seems like their offense hasn't had much to play for. The way they've been playing, they just haven't been able to put up any statistics. They haven't been able to get the ball in the end zone, and that's one of the real problems. Is if you get down there, you gotta punch it in for 6.
Right, and Brian Ferentz, he was asked, what do they have to lose if they potentially trot out Alex Padilla as opposed to Spencer Petras? And sort of his reply was, we have a ton to lose. There's a lot to lose, and something along those lines. And I think it's kind of interesting that Spencer Petras, he's thrown more than C.J. Stroud this year by one attempt, believe it or not, but he's not really making the most of it. Him and C.J. Stroud have the same amount of interceptions. The only problem is Spencer Petras only has two touchdown passes this year, as opposed to C.J. Stroud's 24. So it's just a complete out of balance. It's just a dinosaur way of playing football. The ground and pound, limiting through the air, it's just not sustainable in today's college football realm. You look at some of the past championship winners. You have Trevor Lawrence, you have Deshaun Watson, you have Joe Burrow, some of these great quarterbacks. Cardale Jones in the inaugural CFP, he played with his hair on fire, just caught lightning in a bottle for those 3 games. And, you just look at that, and that's what you need to win in college football today. You need a C.J. Stroud, you need a Hendon Hooker, those type players to be able to make plays and help your EPA, your expected points added per play,
Going off that, Iowa does not control its own destiny. So they might try a couple things if the season doesn't turn out where they're going to be in Indianapolis. But I think
try a couple things in the sense you could see some trickeration this weekend,
I don't really know because the closest thing to me, the problem is there's not really a good comp other than Michigan and how they dominate the ground, and they are not at that level personnel-wise. That's one of the problems is you can still dominate on the ground and control the game, but you have to have a little bit there under center. And Iowa, say what you will about Spencer Petras, they just don't have it right now.
And I said before this podcast I was going to try to speak as nicely as possible as I could on the Iowa offense, but I just pulling this up in front of me, it makes me so sad because they're dead last in the FBS in yards per game, 238.7 yards per game. Next 4 teams ahead of them are 1-6 UMass, 1-5 Colorado State, 2-5 New Mexico State, and 2-5 New Mexico. So with this kind of antiquated offense in a division as highly competitive as the Big Ten. And no, don't get me wrong. I know Iowa made the Big Ten championship game last year. I know that, they're probably guaranteed a bowl game every single year just because of how good their defense is, how good, they are in the trenches, and how, Kirk Ferentz just runs that offense. It's like you guys said, it kind of ground and pound style. But this season, it just doesn't seem like it's working. And with Ohio State's defense, they're top 10 nationally in about 6 categories. They're 6th in third down percentage, 27% conversions on third down. They're second in first down, total first downs allowed 75. 7th in passing yards, only 160.3 yards per game. 9th in rushing yards, 93.2 yards per game. And 10th in scoring at 15.7. The only team to put up more than 300 yards on Ohio State's defense this season, Toledo. And I don't see in this universe or any others where I was able to do that this weekend.
Jacob, you want another nugget?
2 for 1. Special. Line it up.
Spencer Petras, 939 passing yards this season. Take a wild guess how many yards C.J. Stroud had in the first 3 games of the year.
It's got to be around there because Stroud didn't throw for that many in the first game against Notre Dame. How many did you say? 939? My guess would be like 850. That's my guess.
850's not bad, but Stroud's a Heisman caliber quarterback, 1,000 plus.
I'd go 1,100.
941.
Ooh.
He had 223 against Notre Dame, 351 against Arkansas State, and 367 against Toledo.
No 400? No 400. Wow.
Nope. He has not had a 400-yard game this year. So those first 3 games, he outpassed Spencer Petras for the entire 6-game Iowa season in, 161 pass attempts. That's, just awful numbers. I can't keep saying it enough. It's going to be a slog. And Iowa had this cold weather in Columbus that we've been experiencing with the cold raininess. Had that continued into Saturday, we might see ourselves a nice little 21-13 classic Big Ten win for Ohio State. But it's going to be 70 degrees. C.J. Stroud's going to be in his SoCal element, and I think he throws for 6 touchdowns against a very stout Iowa secondary.
Yeah, it is a very stout secondary. I take a look at Jack Campbell's stats, and he has been a long-time veteran and staple on that Iowa Hawkeye defense. Look at him; he's had double-digit tackle figures in their last 2 games, and Iowa's also coming off a bye itself. So both of these 2 teams are coming in wanting to maybe jump on their second half of the season a little bit there. It's intriguing to hear if C.J. Stroud can either get to 400 yards or 6 passing touchdowns. His game against Michigan State was almost very similar to his game against Michigan State last season. He just plays really well against teams that he's seen before. In Iowa's case, Ohio State doesn't get to see Iowa too much. I'm curious how Ryan Day and co feel about Iowa making the Big Ten title game last year. But, I think the taste of revenge is a big theme for Ohio State this year, and I'm pretty sure that 2017 game is going to be really very much so on the minds of almost anybody in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center this week.
So it sounds like Ohio State, despite playing an inferior opponent, is going to have a chip on their shoulder?
Well, I would think very much so, yes. Want to wipe away that slate from that last loss, survive in advance in a sense,
and
protect the shoe.
So that doesn't really bode well for the Hawkeyes because Ohio State's, when you look at the talent on the roster, they're up there, obviously. But if you piss them off too, that's not really a recipe for success. And it's no fault of these guys. It's just the 2017 team couldn't get it done, and they got blown out at Kinnick. So now these guys are going to have to face the consequence. And this Iowa run defense is pretty stout as well. It's no slouch. Like you were talking about, Jack Campbell right there in the middle. He had over 100 tackles, by far over 100 tackles a season ago. He's already at 63, so he's averaging about 10 tackles a game. So I think that's really going to eliminate the run game. And I think Ryan Day always wants to have balance. He always talks about how he wants to have balance in his offense, but I don't think that necessarily matters. I think as long as they can just get their pitch and catch with all their different options, maybe play a little bit of Iowa brand football, keying in Cade Stover and G. Scott and all those tight ends that they have at their disposal, trying to key in those guys. I think that's where C.J. Stroud makes his bread and butter. And this kind of has, I know it's a little bit different, but it has a feel of like a Purdue or a Michigan State from last year, where Ohio State, like, they've kind of had these ghosts of football past, kind of haunting them from prior losses, and Ohio State comes out and their offense is firing on all cylinders. They put up, I believe, 59 on Purdue, and then they put up 56, beat Michigan State 56-7 a year ago when they were on their big run. So this kind of has a very, very similar feel to that.
And I just wanted to mention for how much I just criticized Iowa's offense. Like, I think this weekend will be just a true task of what Ohio State can do against a top 10 defense, because I mean, looking at the stats, Iowa's defense statistically is performing better than Ohio State's. Even though Ohio State is one of 2 teams in the nation with a top 10 defense and offense, the other being Georgia, Iowa's defense is ranked ahead of Ohio State's in terms of scoring defense, only 9.8 points per game. Total defense, 265 yards per game. That's 5th in the Big Ten, 7th in the NCAA. And then, passing defense, they're only giving up 154 yards per game and only giving up around 82 on the ground. So, this will be a good test, especially off a bye week, to see if Ohio State looks rusty and what they can do against a defense that, we all know how bad Iowa's offense is, but in my opinion, like, their defense is probably the most underrated in the country.
Well, their defense is their calling card, and you talked about earlier where they rank. A lot of 1-5 teams, they are 3-3. They have not fallen all the way to the bottom. They're in the middle of the pack, and it will be difficult this weekend. I like what Casey was talking about with that Michigan State game. Scoring wise, that's what you think. It won't be a barn burner shootout. At least that's not likely. You have to also think, how long have the Hawkeyes been out there on defense? That offense has not been good, and sustaining drives has not been something they could really do.
They're losing the time of possession battle. They only have 27 minutes on offense, as opposed to, obviously, do the math, 33 on defense.
And we've seen Ryan Day really control that time of possession when he's needed to. Now, he might not need to this weekend, but that's just something to keep an eye on, because the Buckeyes can run the ball. They have a pretty good offensive line. They have a couple pretty good running backs. We'll have to see who's healthy and who's playing. But behind that offensive line, either of those guys could have a monster day, regardless of who's there on the line or in the linebacking core.
Another key thing I'm looking at, Ohio State's scored every time they've gone down to the red zone. They've been able to punch it in. They had a scare against Rutgers with those 7 plays inside the 5. But, I mean, also their touchdown percentage is off the charts. 27 of 29 red zone trips have resulted in a touchdown. No offense to Noah Ruggles, but I don't think he's minding being able to sit on the sideline and kind of coast a little bit. He's more for the extra point as opposed to the field goal in my mind. But you look at this Iowa defense, they've only given up 5 touchdowns in, I believe, 15 trips. So that's what, 1/3, 33% touchdown opponent red zone percentage. So is there a chance that we see Ohio State not score in the red zone this weekend?
It'd be very difficult, man. I don't know if Ryan Day is ready to give up that streak yet, but I think it's a valid point. You mentioned how stout Iowa's defense is. It's kept them in almost virtually every single game this season. You look at the final score, and Ohio State is, you bring up how that stand there against Rutgers, and they had that scare in the red zone there. Ohio State's playing safer this year than they are last year. I just think back to the punts up against Notre Dame there in week 1, and Ohio State's looking to maybe accomplish some things in this game. 1, defeat Iowa, wash its hands of the previous matchup, and 2, I think with Penn State having lost to Michigan this past weekend, Ohio State now has to almost reinforce or justify its wins, because they are losing a little bit of that value over time as the season's gone on. Notre Dame hasn't played up to that top 10, even a ranked team caliber like many thought going into the season. And so Ohio State's just going to have to not let up off the gas, and it's something that we've seen Ohio State do in all 6 of its games so far this season almost.
So I'll get to you, Gabe, but I just have – actually, I'll throw you this question,
I'm intrigued by that mindset because, we talked about it last week. Going for it on your own side of the field at Michigan State in a 1-score game to kind of blow that game open. And then in the third quarter, you're up, I believe, 42-13, 4th down at like the 2-yard line. G. Scott Jr. with the receiving touchdown on the play action rollout. I believe it was a 4th down call. If you think you can get it, Ryan Day is going to try to get that first down, get that touchdown. He's not afraid to say, Ruggles, stay on the sideline. We're going to try to punch this in for 6 or 7. And I think that's what they're going to need at the end of the year against Michigan. But you don't want to show too much of your cards and what you're planning on doing. But it seems to me he's been a little bit more aggressive as the season has gone on. But, I mean, this defense has not really made it much of an issue.
Right, and it's interesting. So what you're saying is Ohio State, they kind of need style points, right?
It would almost seem suffice to say, yeah. I mean, that's a big reason why I've said Ohio State needs to score at least 40 in every game.
Right, and wouldn't it be kind of interesting if early in the game, Ohio State, maybe they get a quick stop on defense, they're driving down, it's still a tied 0-0 ball game, they're inside the 5, it's a 4th down, they go for it, Iowa gets a stop, and it's still 0-0, they have that ground game. Maybe this turns into a low-scoring affair, sort of like a Notre Dame type. I mean, and if Iowa can force a turnover, maybe it's not of the pick-6 variety like it was against Michigan State, but if they can force a turnover, maybe get a 4th down stop in the red zone, Ohio State might be looking a little bit worried as opposed to not necessarily worried, but Ohio State should beat them. What was it? Ryan Day had a fan come up and say, "Oh, you're going to beat them 63-0, right?" Maybe they're coming in with that mindset with just how inefficient the Iowa offense has been. But I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a slow start, and Ohio State needs to kind of knock the rust off from not playing in a couple weeks.
Well, when's the last time this Buckeyes defense scored?
Few and far between, that's for sure.
Have they scored this year? They have a defensive score this year?
No.
They had that pick against Graham Mertz, which was a gift. But besides that, fumble against Rutgers, and the Ransom interception, which was an arm punt, they really haven't showcased their scoring ability. And if this could be a situation where they get one of those that they can take back to the house, whether it's, Sawyer picking up a fumble on a strip sack or one of those DBs making a play and bringing it back to the house, especially considering this could be a field position game, like you said. If it is in the trenches, close, low scoring, it's going to be a priority to make sure you're on a good area of the field and you can score from that area if you get a stop.
The last time Iowa beat Ohio State in Ohio Stadium?
Was it 1988?
That's a very good guess, but you're a little off. It's 1991. The song "Smells Like Teen Spirit" by Nirvana had come out 2 months before that game. So that's how long it's been since Iowa has come to the shoe and beat Ohio State.
It's a good song.
It's a great song, but just looking at everything, I think I've been as tame as I could be discussing Iowa's offense. So for this weekend, we got a noon kickoff. First off the bye. We'll see how Ohio State does. The spread is 29 in favor of Ohio State. And I'm not sure what the over-under is, but in my opinion, I don't see how Iowa scores more than 14 points other than maybe 7 safeties. So I'll go Ohio State 49, Iowa 10. So Ohio State covers.
Considering going that route as well, but I think Ohio State, they're going to score. It's just, are they going to score more than Iowa's given up on the season touchdown-wise? I think they're going to equal that total, and they're going to add a field goal. Ruggles is finally going to get some action. I think this is a 38-17 Buckeye victory, just because this has the makings. Casey touched on weather and conditions. This has the makings of a grounded-out, pounded-out game where field position matters. So, if the Buckeyes get in a situation like Notre Dame, like that game where they have to win it on the ground, they've shown they can do that against a good defense before. It is concerning to me. For Buckeye fans out there, don't be surprised if this game is 7-0. 7-3, 3-0 after one quarter, because this Buckeyes team, like so many before it, has shown to be a second half adjustments team. So we'll have to see what they do once they go into the break and come out of it.
All right, bye week with no score predictions, kind of, and we're back with them. I think this game for Ohio State, I think there's a lot about this game. We think about what happened this past weekend in college football. Hendon Hooker and Tennessee stole kind of the headlines there, dethroned Alabama, but now who's the clear Heisman favorite now? Is it Hooker? Is it Stroud? Stroud might have to want to plead his case a little bit this weekend. I like, how you mentioned Stroud could throw for a bunch of touchdowns this weekend. I think I see that happening. I see Ohio State also trying to win the field position game there and the run game as well. I think it'll be one of Ohio State's most well-balanced games, just based on the fact that Iowa's defense, can really, pick apart teams in different ways. I still don't see too much success for Iowa's offense. That's why it's going to lead to me predicting a 49-3 Ohio State win. I think this is the closest Ohio State gets to getting the shutout it needs in a championship-worthy resume. I think Ohio State won't have too much trouble with Iowa's offense. And we talk about style points. I'm not saying Ohio State's going to shut out Iowa. Shutouts are very hard to come by, but this might be Ohio State's best chance to get those style points. Tommy Eichenberg and Jack Campbell, it was going to be a very fun battle there at linebacker. Tommy Eichenberg gets an interception.
I like where your head's at, Jacob. I really do. Fresh off the bat, I'll say 49-9. Believe the 9 will be
a safety, maybe.
College
I always
Papers?
had that.
No, I was going to be bold and say touchdown, missed extra point, and then a field goal. But
Sicko.
no, it's just going to be 3 field goals. It's going to be standard. I think for everything that we've said about Iowa's defense, you saw how Ohio State was able to handle Notre Dame's defense. It pretty much controlled that game, even though it was a little bit closer than people expected. The Wisconsin defense they handled. So I don't see this slipping through the cracks. And coming off the bye, there's no need for you to really look ahead to Penn State in my mind, especially with the landscape of college football like we've been talking about. I think Ohio State tries to get a little creative. I think they can do that, and I think they just roll over them 49-9.
And on that note, that will do it for Episode 8 of the Lantern Sports Podcast. For Gabe Burggraf, Jacob Benge, Casey Smith, I'm Steven Kishpaugh, and we'll see you in the next episode.